Welcome, Autobots and Decepticons. My name is Matthew Flynn, the gladiator of Kaon, and I am joined by Troy Pacelli, also known as Katon, the Klingon cleric.
Hey,
Welcome.
how's it going, everyone? Good morning.
Well, since I've already mentioned before that we'll be talking about female Transformers, I don't think we'll start with that because that's a topic that starts off simple and then gets very complicated very quickly. So we're going to save that for a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think what I'll do instead is I shall explain why I have chosen this name because there has been a lingering mystery that's been kind of left without an answer for a while. Now, to start off with, it's the name actually comes from the city of Kaon, which is a Decepticon-controlled city, or it started off as a Decepticon-controlled city before the Great War started, and basically it's like a gladiator, an arena in the actual Kaon city that was called the Pits of Kaon. So basically, it's like a gladiator of the Pits of Kaon, basically, and I'm pretty sure there are multiple Decepticons who would have gone by the title of the Gladiator or the Champion or something like that. But I specifically took this from Megatron from the Transformers Prime cartoon, because in that cartoon he specifically says to because after he's fighting an Insecticon and defeats it, he then says, "Let that be a lesson to all those who oppose me. They oppose a gladiator of Kaon, be they Autobot or Decepticon."
Hmm. So in the continuity in the canon, generally when you say the Gladiator of Kaon, you're specifically speaking of Megatron.
Yes, that's specifically where I got the name from.
Nice.
Because in Transformers Prime, Megatron was near unstoppable in that show. It took quite a lot to take him down, and it didn't last very long as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was him being so unstoppable was also elevated by the fact that Starscream was always around Megatron, and Starscream was always shown to be a lot smaller than him, very thin. Also, he had a very cowardly type personality. And the second any danger came to him, he would run or get out of there, or immediately turn his back on whatever plan was being made.
Mm.
Whereas Megatron was the exact opposite. He was very large, bulky, very intimidating. Didn't back down from any kind of fight that came his way.
Sounds kind of Klingon.
Actually, I suppose you could consider Prime Megatron very Klingon. I mean, he does have the sharp teeth.
Yeah.
Well, that is somewhat fitting, as in various Transformers shows, there are a few Star Trek actors. Like Michael Dorn has voiced Metroplex in one of the more recent shows. And also in Transformers Prime, Jeffrey Combs has voiced Ratchet. There are
Yeah.
a whole bunch of other Star Trek actors who have also
I
voiced
was gonna say,
Transformers.
yeah, I love Jeffrey Combs. He's played just about everything. My gosh. I like how Artificer Joni puts it. Decepticon culture is very Klingon-y at times. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, that's it. Only George Takei, that's another Star Trek actor who was in Transformers.
Hmm.
I didn't know he was in Transformers anime because I've not watched much of that. I personally know him from voicing Alpha Trion in Transformers Prime, although Alpha Trion was only in an episode or two of the show. He wasn't like a full-time character in the show.
So
Oh, yeah.
this may actually seem like a really weird question. And I think what's even weirder is that we're so many episodes into this that I'm just starting to think about it. But we're talking about essentially robots, right? Which is fine. I mean, the idea of sentient, intelligent robots makes perfect sense. And they've even covered in some of the stories, they have a spark that's like their soul. They can pass on their intelligence to another generation. You can think of it almost like reincarnation or something like that.
Yeah.
But did they ever go into like the origins of where they came from, how they came into existence? Were they designed? Were they,
There are actually multiple creation myths for Transformers.
Hmm.
One for each specific core continuity. Like the G1 cartoon had an origin for where the Transformers came from, and also the Marvel comic. The IDW comic has its own creation myth. Same for the Dreamwave comics. Most of the more modern Transformers continuities do tend to pull from one specific creation myth with some minor variations. I believe, Transformers Prime, which was the part of the what is called the aligned continuity,
Mm-hmm.
which that's kind of a complicated topic in itself now I think about it. But after that specific point, all further Transformers shows and comics and movies started pulling from that specific continuity for any sort of creation myth, with some minor variations here and there. The basis actually comes mostly from the Marvel comic, because obviously the cartoon and comic told two different origins, which you could kind of squint at it and assume they're the same origin, but there is a few conflicting details there.
Got it. Yeah. Because I mean, if you think about it, I obviously I came to it very much the way any viewer would. You don't see what went before, you don't see what came after it, you see it right at the slice you come in at. And I come in where there's a bunch of toys that are robots that fold up into other real world things, whether it's cars, a boombox, a gun,
Yeah.
and it really causes you to start to think, well, this is a robot. Someone had to create this robot. Why did they create them to do this? Well, I think it's kind of in the jingle for the commercials, right? Robots in disguise. Okay, there was a reason that somebody wanted to create robots that could act as their agents or whatever, but hide themselves in plain sight as other objects. But then that you start to think, why? Who was it? How did it happen? Why Earth objects? If it's an alien thing, wouldn't they look like alien objects? And then I know that as the thing goes along, and then you get into Beast Wars, you get into other things, their reasoning for changing, their ability to change, and what they change into changes. So I get that's kind of a amorphic kind of thing, but yeah, I mean, this is just how your mind starts thinking when you look at these stories.
It's actually funny because early on, the whole idea of the Transformers actually transforming,
Mhm.
was initially presented as a wartime innovation, and then later on, in later continuities, they then changed that so that transforming is a natural part of their biology rather than any sort of advancement in technology.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting. And then it also causes me to consider a theory. What if it's an organic race that wanted to put themselves into robots, and when they decided to go into robots, it was like, well, let's be as multifunctional as possible.
It's there's definitely a precedent for something like that happening in Transformers. Not necessarily as an origin for the species overall, but that has definitely happened. Like with Headmasters and Target Masters and Power Masters, they all started off as like a Cybertronian, and then a smaller organic being like surgically altered to be more mechanical, so it can then combine with the larger robot
Hmm.
in like whatever specific way it is. Like if it's Headmaster, he turns into the head. If it's a Target Master, he'll turn into the larger robot's gun. And if it's a Power Master, he turns into like a power source to make him stronger.
Hmm.
And there's also, I believe it's in IDW comics, they have a more organic origin for like something like the Micromasters, where they started out as being organic aliens from another planet who are experimented on by a Cybertronian scientist. I think his name's Giaxes.
Hmm.
He basically experimented on them and converted them into more mechanical, more. So they end up basically looking more like Transformers and less like the organic beings they used to be.
Hmm.
But that's like specifically the Micromasters in IDW comics, not necessarily the race as a whole.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll explain the creation myth for the Marvel comic introduced. And it basically starts with Primus and Unicron, who are basically a star at the beginning of the universe. They basically already exist, and they've been fighting each other probably since the universe created. And with like no end in sight to them, two of them fighting, they then Primus then decided to trick Unicron into tricked him into like becoming trapped. So he left his body and went into like an astral plane, I suppose is the best way I can describe it. And then Unicron also went into like an astral plane and chased after him. And then Primus opened a portal back to the physical world, and hoping that Unicron would just blindly chase him and not really think about where he's going to end up. They both then come out the other side in the real world, trapped inside asteroids, and then slowly over time they use like their mental energy or their psionic energy to reform their asteroids they're trapped in into like resembling more mechanical more mechanical worlds rather than asteroids. So Unicron mutated his asteroid into his robot form that you see in the 1986 movie.
Hmm.
And then Primus reforms his asteroid that he's trapped in. He reforms that into Cybertron itself. Obviously, this happens slowly over millions of years. And then Unicron travels throughout the universe searching for where Primus is and just destroying and consuming whatever he comes across. And Primus, he first he creates the 13 primes, which are the first 13 transformers in the actual species, to help him in defeating Unicron. Although at this point, because Unicron doesn't know where Primus is, it's really more of a defensive measure, while Primus himself deactivates himself so that Unicron can't find his energy. I suppose you call it energy signature, or his spirit or his spark.
Yeah.
So that Unicron will just won't be able to detect him. He'll just come across as just a random metal planet, rather than Unicron seeing him as Primus. And also, Primus also bestows upon one of the primes the matrix of leadership, which is then passed down from prime to prime throughout the generations, so that they can still have a piece of his power and wisdom. Now, obviously, the cartoon's origin has nothing to do with that. In fact, the cartoon has a completely different origin for why Unicron exists. Because
You looking for something?
yeah, I'm on Google right now. I'm going to bring up some other comic images relating to the Unicron and Primus origin. Yeah, this right here is the right idea. Just two basic creation myths, or at least early on in Generation 1 continuity, at least. Yeah, here we go. There we go. So this comic panel right here, so we have this one up here is Unicron, and then this one right here is Primus. And this is their spirit forms, if I'm not mistaken. Because this was first told in the issues of the Marvel UK comic. And because this was written by Simon Furman, who would later take over writing the American comic, and he would basically retell this origin in the US comic when he started writing it. Yeah, here's another image. It would be nice if the image wasn't quite so small on the actual stream.
If you right click on it, you should be able to open it in another tab.
Oh, that.
No, huh? It's got to be there somewhere. There we go.
Oh, there's a repeating image from the 1986 movie. That should probably give you some kind of scale, because this tiny little thing here, that's Galvatron, who by comparison, Galvatron is like the size of a house, or probably about the size of a two-story house, possibly a little bigger than that. So that should give you some scale how big Unicron is in comparison.
Yeah.
Okay, that's... Yeah, here's... Oh, okay. There we go. Yeah, this is the first Prime to actually hold the Matrix of Leadership, who I believe his name was Primer, I believe. I think it says it here somewhere. Yeah, I believe this first member of the Primes was one of the earliest to be named. And all of the other Primes did actually... Well, they weren't all named. It was... It's because early in the 80s, when they were making these comics and the cartoon, the names of the different Primes, that wasn't like a clear and concrete thing that had been established in the law yet. So they're still slightly vague on how many of them there were and what their names were and that sort of thing. Yeah, I can pull up the official names of the different Primes. Actually, while I do this, I'll do that, rather than having everyone just sit here and watch me go through various pages.
So, do the Primes maintain some sort of consciousness continuity with the original Primus?
Well, the Primes do. The Primes and all subsequent Cybertronians after them, they do, I suppose you could say, worship Primus as a god, because he is technically a god of life and creation. But obviously, even in the early days of the comics and cartoons, only the comic actually had established Primus, whereas the cartoon, that detail hadn't been established anywhere in the cartoon.
Sure.
So that went basically unexplained. And then it was later on in Beast Wars where we actually got one of the characters that actually mentioned Primus in like an animated show. Yeah, so the primes, because yeah, here it is, Primer. Yeah, he's the one who has the Matrix. And basically, the Matrix contains all of the knowledge and wisdom of Primus himself, and then every prime or every transformer that the Matrix turns into a prime, all of their knowledge and wisdom and experience that they gain over their lifetime is then stored inside the Matrix. And then obviously when they die, it's then passed down to another Cybertronian who's worthy to be turned into a prime. And then
Gotcha.
that like cycle just will continue for as long as the Matrix exists, I would imagine.
So the Matrix is sort of like a collective consciousness.
Yep. That's why in the G1 cartoon, in the season 3 finale called The Return of Optimus Prime, basically a bunch of human scientists who hate Cybertronians because I think one of the scientists' daughter was paralyzed by an Autobot and Decepticon conflict, destroying part of their lab, and so he's like going to hate Transformers in general, and he engineers like this a hate plague, which then he intends to then spread to all the Transformers by using the body of Optimus Prime as like a decoy. But what ends up happening is the hate plague not only spreads to every Cybertronian who like comes into contact with any other Cybertronian who's infected, it also starts infecting basically anything else that's alive. So then the universe rapidly gets covered in a hate plague, and Optimus Prime, when he's been brought back to life by the Quintessons, he then retrieves the Matrix from Rodimus Prime, and as his solution to getting rid of the hate plague is to empty the collective wisdom of the primes out of the Matrix and into the universe. So he's basically countering hatred with wisdom. I'm not sure if that would actually work like that, but there's some kind of
Narratively
a
speaking,
logic
it
to it.
seems to, yeah.
Yeah. Although by the end of it, the Matrix is then empty because obviously all the wisdom's gone and it's all out, just spread all across the universe. And when one of the characters points out that the Matrix is empty now, Optimus does then remark, "Is like, but we're all a bit wiser now."
Yeah. Melissa Harris brings up something that just got me thinking. She said Transformers had a zombie prime. For Transformers, what would a zombie be? They'd be like a body with no spark and a rudimentary, AI, maybe.
Or maybe with no AI at all. I believe what Melissa Harris is referring to is an episode of the G1 cartoon called Dark Awakening, where Optimus Prime's body. This is during season 3, but so before he's like properly resurrected from the dead. This is where the Quintessons have kind of messed with his corpse to kind of somewhat give him life, but not completely. So he's kind of walking around as like I suppose you could call a soulless revenant or a walking husk, maybe.
Yeah.
And he's like and he's basically wandering about this ship called the Mausoleum that's basically carrying all of the deceased Autobots that died during the Great War. And like while he's in there, a group of Autobots take refuge in there from a group of Decepticons that are hunting them, and they also have a human with them called Daniel Witwicky. I think he's like a 10, 11-year-old kid, I think, and like and he sees this what is effectively a zombie Optimus Prime, and he's like very freaked out by it, especially since he's one of the characters who actually was present for Optimus Prime's death as well, which probably is not healthy for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's Zombie Prime. He does actually so he like I don't know if he tricks the Autobots like with Rodimus Prime and their group, but he goes up to them, and he's obviously not acting of his own free will because the Quintessons have programmed him to act like this. And he obviously Rodimus Prime, he's all too eager to give up leadership back to Prime because he's like really feeling the weight of leadership.
Sure.
Like it's really weighing heavy on him. Well, that is one of Rodimus's arcs, is to like learn to accept the burden of leadership. But yeah, so he's like very eager to give up leadership to when he thinks Prime's come back. Obviously, he doesn't know that this is really only just Prime's body, necessarily Prime fully come back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when the Matrix is like put back into Prime, it does kind of somewhat return Prime to life. So I think some of like Primus's like life-giving powers, I would imagine, work through the Matrix, and that's probably why it kind of somewhat restores Prime to life a little bit.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of that episode, Optimus Prime does sacrifice himself to stop the Quintessons from what they were trying to do, and this actually ends up with him being even more disfigured and mangled than he was in the '86 movie. Yeah, there was a few other instances of, I suppose, zombie Transformers. Actually, well, okay, if I do that for a moment. Yeah, and I'll bring up a video from Transformers Prime. I'm not going to worry about the sound because that's not necessarily the important part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Artificial Journey. Transformers Prime is the show that has what is basically zombie Transformers. Although in this show they're called Terracons, which is actually a reuse of a G1 Decepticon Combiner team that were called the Terracons. Well, in that instance, the Terracons they were weird monster things. Okay, here's one video relating to zombie Transformers and Terracons more specifically. Yes, that's a piece of dark energon,
Hmm.
which is also referred to as the blood of Unicron, because Unicron is the lord of the undead and also the embodiment of evil and chaos as well. As you can see, these are definitely draw more of an influence from what everyone would perceive to be zombies.
Sure. And it's a simple logical, concept, especially when you're dealing with, with a robot, right? I mean, this idea of a infectious virus, that can pass from one to the other.
Yeah. Although in this situation, they don't actually like convert other Transformers into zombies, but rather it's when a Transformer dies and they're then exposed to Dark Energon, then they are resurrected from the dead. And also Dark Energon in this situation has a similar effect as Kryptonite does to Superman, except not quite as extreme. Because prolonged exposure to Dark Energon does slowly sap the strength of like living Transformers. This is definitely a very enjoyable show to watch. There is definitely a I'll do that and I'll bring up the other clip. I think it's this one. Yeah, there is a slightly strange topic when it comes to Transformers, is the fact that sometimes they are shown to be like able to age, and then other times they can like last nearly forever. Because in the 80s cartoon, they when they Autobots and Decepticons crash landed on Earth, they crash landed in prehistoric time, and then they went into stasis and stayed that way for basically millions of years until the eruption of the volcano that the Ark crashed into reactivates the ship's systems and basically revives them out of stasis lock in like 1984. It's like that's a very large amount of time, and they're basically unchanged for all that time. But then there are other instances where Transformers can actually physically grow old. That's kind of a slight inconsistency there. I don't fully understand how that works exactly. Now, this bit is actually a little more humorous than the other one. Yeah. I love that moment where he's like I love that moment where he's like aim for the head.
Yeah.
He's like looking at him. He's like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "I've seen human horror films." He's like in drive-through theater. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Okay. So yeah, I mean I think like the concept of the zombie pretty much works in just about everything, right? I mean, it works with Transformers, it works, basic regular horror. I think any life form you got, the idea of a revenant continuing on, turning what was once a living body into a meat husk, or just an empty shell is kind of creepy. There's a vampire equivalent. Okay, see now, if you can have a zombie, yeah, it just makes sense that something that is, a revived, corpse, so to speak, that then draws sustenance off the spark of, others. There you go. That's your vampire. It's a pretty natural progression. Well, unnatural progression, however you want to put it. So yeah, basically the Transformers have vampires, they have zombies, they have their whole undead arsenal. So yeah, we were basically saying that we got zombies. It's not a very far cry then to the concept of vampires. Makes perfect sense. These are universal things that
No, I
work.
haven't done it yet.
He's not back yet.
Okay, there we go. I am back from the standard Professor Geek break.
We were just talking about the fact that there's not only zombies in the Transformer world, but also vampires, which I said actually makes perfect sense as a natural progression. If you could be a revenant husk, and then in addition, sustain yourself by drawing on the spark of other Transformers, then there's your vampire.
Oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. Although I'd imagine they draw more from the energon flowing through the Transformer.
Okay, yeah.
Because all Transformers require energon for their body to function.
Right.
And also for their weapons to work as well. Actually, energon has like a multi-function when it comes to Transformers. Because it's their power source, their blood. It also can function as a beverage for them as well.
Well, that's definitely a vampire. But yeah, it makes sense. So this whole idea of there being this concept of a unnatural, perversion of life for the Transformers kind of starts to beg the question, and we've kind of gotten at it as we were talking about creation myths and theories of where they came from. How do you get more Transformers? Who builds them? How are they made? Where do little Transformers come from?
Well, that would be either you would construct a new Transformer out of like various spare parts or just various parts. Obviously, you would then need transformation cog so the Cybertron can transform. And then you would also need a brain module so that it can actually think and actually think for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And also you would need some method of giving that constructed Cybertronian an actual a spark, like its actual soul, which in the G1 cartoon was done by Vector Sigma, which the supercomputer on Cybertron. That would be the method of giving us Cybertronian like an actual spark or soul, or at least in the G1 cartoon. But there are other methods of like creating a transformer. There's one method where the transformers just sort of spawn out of the metal of the planet. I believe that was one of the origins in the Marvel comic.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one where they would where a Cybertron would sort of split off from another Cybertron, kind of like a single cell like organ, like something like that. Yeah, like how a cell kind of copies and splits off into two.
Sure.
Kind of something like that.
Sort of a mitosis sort of thing.
Yeah.
So basically, even though I know we were going to talk about it today, is there really a need for genders among the Transformers? I mean, it's not like you need a boy and a girl to love each other very much in order to make your next generation of Transformers.
And here's where it's going to start simple and get very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
So the simple part of this is the G1 cartoon presented it as male and female Transformers, or Transformers that looked male and Transformers that looked female were male and female, but they didn't actually have any kind of like human male or female reproductive organs. it's kind of weird. It's like, I suppose they're like female in name only or male in name only, or in like their visual appearance. But the Marvel comic went with the idea that they have no gender and they don't understand that concept. But then later on, the comic then established that there are like natural female Transformers. Because like with RC, she was constructed, or like the story I talked about our last Transformers stream about the whole RC being constructed by Prime because feminists get angry that Transformers don't have any females.
Yeah, which
That was
again, what you're really doing is you're pushing for there to be, a representation in a place where representation makes absolutely zero sense. You're talking about robots with no gender, and you're going, well, there's no females. Well, there's not really males either,
Yeah. And it gets more complicated when we go into like something like IDW's comics, where they also went with the idea that they're robots and don't have a gender.
Yeah.
And that the scientist G-Axis that I mentioned earlier, that he then took one of the Cybertronians and experimented on them to turn one of them into a female Transformer. And that was how we got RC in the IDW comics, which was very confusing because later on in IDW comics, they then also introduced the idea that there are like colony worlds just with natural female Transformers.
Yeah.
And that one of the primes is female, and that's apparently why there are female Transformers. So it's like, that's two conflicting ideas that makes it very confusing very quickly.
Well, and again, this is, I honestly think, you really should have function follow form, and unfortunately you have form being projected onto function. It's like, for an artificial nonsensical reason. There is a reason that we have sexes in biological creatures. For there's just no purpose for it, in these beings. I mean, that would be like some sort of hermaphroditic creature on Earth, a worm or a slug or whatever, suddenly spontaneously having a male for some reason. Well, why? What good is that? That's like being only half a being, So I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. And obviously we have the various primes here. I believe this is the up-to-date list of the primes. I suppose with the exception of Optimus and Sentinel here at the bottom, then technically not the first 13, or at least not part of it. In fact, Sentinel Prime here isn't like a proper Prime. He's just named Prime because
he's the first.
So at some point between when Primus gave the Matrix to Primer and Optimus receiving the Matrix, Sentinel Prime here didn't actually have the Matrix and wasn't a Prime, or at least in more modern stories, he's not an actual Prime. In the G1 cartoon, we do see a hint of Sentinel Prime where he dies and passes the Matrix on to Alpha Trion, who keeps it safe and secret. And then at a later point, Alpha Trion then rebuilds Orion Pax into Optimus Prime, and he also gives him the Matrix, which makes him a Prime.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and each of the different primes has something relevant to them that's like that they represent. So you have Micronus Prime here. He is the first mini Kaon, or I suppose you could think of him as a Micromaster as well. Those two concepts are kind of interchangeable at this point. And you have Onyx Prime, who is the first Transformer with a Beast mode. Solus Prime here, that's the female Prime, who is also the blacksmith of the Primes, and she's the one who creates all their weapons. Quintus Prime here is the originator of the Quintessons. Obviously Alpha Trion here, who's the records keeper, and I suppose you could call him a cleric of the Primes, or at least I suppose that would be a suitable title. Although every time I hear the word cleric, I immediately think of the fantasy class that's more related to healing magic.
Oh.
And then you have obviously Primer and Megatronus, who's the Fallen. He was corrupted by Unicron. Here are some images of them. Oh yeah, and you have the 13th Prime, who is unnamed, and I'm pretty sure it's hinted at that he is like reincarnated as Optimus Prime. Well, I don't know if that's accurate for every version. Yeah, here's an image of Solus Prime. There's Quintus Prime, who looks definitely influenced from Cthulhu and very Lovecraftian looking.
Yeah.
And then this is Micronus Prime. Here's Megatronus. Oh no, wait, no, that's not Megatronus. That's Megatronus. Because he has the Requiem blaster on his arm. And then this is Onyx Prime. Oops. Oh, here's one of Alpha Trion. Do that. So you can kind of see the whole records keeper and cleric type vibes to him. Not sure where he got the feather from, considering he's a robot from a mechanical planet. I suppose it just kind of completes the look to have the feather and the book. And now that we've gotten through probably not everything to do with female Transformers, but a large bulk of it. And there's also one thing that I have been working on, and that's a fan fiction continuation of the G1 cartoon. Well, not so much a continuation, kind of more of more finalized conclusion for the G1 cartoon. Because with that, I intend to kind of tie up any loose ends with the end of the G1 cartoon, and then tie that more into the Beast Wars cartoon. So there's more of a connection between the two. And I'm also including the some elements from the Transformers Devastation game, because that game takes place during the G1 cartoon, and that game also ended on a cliffhanger with some elements that were left unfinished there. So I thought I will include elements from that and kind of give that a conclusion, while also giving more of a finalized conclusion and connection between the end of the G1 cartoon and the start of Beast Wars. Because there's a couple plot threads that are just sort of abandoned by the end. Well, we've been going for about an hour now.
Yep. And so, at what point does this bring us up to in real time? You know, the ages of the incarnations of Transformers that we've been talking about here.
Wait, do you mean in
like, when did these come out? When did these stories? Because you mentioned, you know, the titles of different runs of Transformers, but I don't really have an idea of when they were, you know, broadcast or published.
Okay, so the origin with Unicron and Primus, that was printed in the pages of the Marvel UK comic back in the 80s. I believe it was after the animated film, so it would have been late 1986, possibly 1987. And then some of the stuff that I just showed you with the primes, like with the different names and then the different images of them, that was released. That information was given in the it was related to the aligned continuity, but specifically that information was revealed first in a book that was called The Covenant of Primus. I'll bring up an image. I think you can still get a copy of The Covenant of Primus. I'm not sure if that's even still available anymore. I think that might have been like a convention exclusive, like collectible type item. And then because the Covenant of Primus, that came out before the Transformers Prime TV show, which would have been about 2009, 2008, around that time. Because obviously you had Transformers animated in 2007, along with the movie itself.
Speaking of which, we haven't really talked too much about those Michael Bay films. How does the community feel about those movies?
That would be very much depend. Yeah, this is the Covenant of Primus book. Yeah, so this contains all the information. Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to the Michael Bay movies. Obviously, I think a lot of Transformers fans probably dislike the Bay films, but for different reasons. Like, some people dislike them for the visual style of the movies, the very poor attempt at storytelling, the focus on human characters rather than the robots themselves. And also the and then obviously you have other Transformers fans who do like the Michael Bay films, and obviously they'll like them for different reasons as well.
Mhm.
But I would imagine that obviously you got the general audiences don't seem to like them despite giving them money whenever one comes out,
Yeah.
which is I chalk that up to the marketing, because I don't know if Michael Bay had a hand in the actual marketing of the films, but that is something he is good at, is advertising stuff to people.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, most of the time you like go to any kind of Transformers message boards, or maybe like a specific stream, like Transformers related, and ask about like the Michael Bay movies, you'll pretty much get a different answer from basically everyone. Although you probably will get the same few arguments from multiple different people as well. I wouldn't necessarily call the reaction to the Bay films like Last Jedi Star Wars type level. They're probably not that hated. They're definitely not like universally loved, but they're not quite on that level of fan dislike.
I mean, this might be a loaded question too, but I know that speaking of marketing, there was a lot of toys that came out in connection with those movies. Those would be in no way compatible with any of the previous toy lines, would they?
No, because the Bayverse toys, because it's such a drastically different visual style.
Yeah.
You could literally take like a collection of most of the like the G1 toys, or maybe the more modern toys, because a lot of the more modern toys tend to style themselves after the G1 characters a lot of the time. But you could just take a few with them, and then take a figure of like a Michael Bay designed Transformer, and then put that next to it, and you'll very easily be able to spot the difference between them. Because the Michael Bay designs have a heavy focus on being like a whole bunch of parts everywhere and jagged edges all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And also the marketing material would primarily advertise Bumblebee, because he's like the kid appeal character of the franchise. And I think ever since the Bay movies, Bumblebee has been the primary kid appeal character. Yes, you got designs like this. Yes, you have this where it's like, weirdly enough, Optimus in this specific design, he's more blue than, like, he's not like solid red and blue, he's just more blue with like red accents. Or I suppose silver with blue and red accents. And for some reason he has a red flame pattern. I don't know why that's there. because yeah, as soon as you put like an image like this next to an image of a more G1 styled Transformer, or just any other like Transformers content other than the Bay movies, and you'll very easily be able to spot the difference. It's like when you look at this, like I'm pretty sure that's meant to be a face, but I can't quite figure out what's what. I can just about see the eyes and what I think is a mouth. I think the mouth's like here, or maybe it's here. I think maybe that's the start of the nose, or maybe this is the nose right here. Like, I don't know who decided to design the characters like this. I think the only way that I can identify that there's eyes here is because they're lit up with a different color than the rest of it. Yeah, and here's a Revenge of the Fallen Bumblebee toy. I believe this same Bumblebee toy was re-released like multiple times. Okay, I know for a fact this figure was released multiple times because there's alternate colors of this figure that's not standard police car colors, but rather is like a various shades of blue, or blue and grey. Also, I feel like I don't know if I've said this before or not, but I feel like it's very like obvious of Hollywood to have the only police car transformer is on the bad guy's side.
Yeah.
I feel like that's exactly what I expect from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Especially since Transformers already has a police car transformer who's a good guy.
Yeah.
It's like, in fact, yeah, because the character of Prowl, he turns into a police car, and he's one of the good guys. He was actually considered to be put into the first live action movie, but the I don't know who it was, who was I think it was one of the producers or one of the studio guys or something. They suggested that they have the police car be the Decepticon rather than an Autobot, and that ended up happening. So yeah, I think that's very identifiable as like a Hollywood producer decision.
Mhm.
Oh, here's an image of two different images of Shia LaBeouf edited in.
Hmm.
I think one is from the movie, and then the other image is taken from. Actually, I don't know where that other image is taken from. Yeah, and here's some images of some of the other toys, or specifically from the Michael Bay toys, or the Michael Bay Transformers toys. Actually, that's one specific detail that I find annoying about these movies, and that's the various color, like the when you look at like an image of Transformers, like the G1 or the or maybe some of the later Transformers toys or cartoons, both Autobots and Decepticons, they're all like very colorful and very like, well, other than being like a very simple designs, like Optimus Prime is like very boxy and like, yeah, they're all like very colorful designs, while the Bay films decided to like dull the colors and not have that many colors.
Mhm.
And for some reason swap around the colors of certain characters, like Ironhide. Like for this image, Ironhide here on the end. He's meant to be red. Obviously, Bumblebee's the accurate colors because he's meant to be yellow. And Optimus is meant to be red and blue. But then you have Ratchet right here. He's meant to be white with like red, with like a red cross symbol on him because he's a police, because he's a rescue, or he's an ambulance. And then Sideswipe. No, it's Jazz. That's how confusing these designs are. I'm mixing up the robots. Yeah, Jazz here is he's meant to be white, like a white and black, and I think blue sports car. And in this film, he's just a silver, silver race or silver car, or a silver supercar or something. Although the reason I confused him with Sideswipe is because in the second film, Sideswipe is also just a random silver car, silver sports car. In fact, they have basically an identical vehicle mode with like only some minor differences. And Sideswipe's meant to be red, so it's like I don't know why they decided to not even bother with the colors. Although I do recall an interview where Michael Bay mentioned that he said something about filming a transformer or a robot like this that's like completely red would be too difficult or something like that. But then in like at least two of the later films, we then see at least two different Transformers who are completely red and are moving around, and it's not a problem whatsoever. So I think that's just a case of Michael Bay talking out his ass.
Hmm.
Oh, I know exactly what Artifice Joni is talking about there. Because there was a I don't know if you would call it like a robot or a guy in a costume. There was basically this Megatron. I think it is a robot. It's like this. I think it's like 2 feet tall or something. It's like Megatron that would just like roast people and like say all sorts of weird things. And there was even one point when a small child walked up to it holding I believe it was I think an Optimus Prime helmet that he was pretending is Optimus Prime's head, and he like brought it to that robot, and the robot was like it was like he's like, ah, you've killed my enemy, my loyal servant, or something like he'd like doing something like that. Let's see if I can. Artifice Journey, do you remember which Universal Park that was in? Or that would definitely help with me finding this clip. Okay, we've got 4 people watching. I'm pretty sure this is it. Oh, no. There we go. Ah, okay. Oh, thanks, Melissa Harris. Great to hear you're still here when listening.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a robot rather than a guy in a costume.
Interesting.
I'm not 100% sure on that. Actually, no, yeah, that might be a guy in a costume. Yeah, I think like some of the joints. I think some of the joints like right here and here. I think like some of the gaps here. I think obviously if you look at this closer, you can kind of see the flat and panel-y like look to it. So it's obviously, yeah, I think that is a guy in a costume. The more I look at it.
Yeah. You got to admit, that's pretty darn good.
Okay, now I'm curious how much the guy in the costume is being paid for this.
Right?
And the it's probably hot inside that costume. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna actually link this clip into the chat so everyone else can watch this. Yeah, because that's got that is actually very amusing because the kid in the Punisher costumes, like when Megatron asked him what his name is, he said Frank Castle, the Punisher, and then the guy in the Megatron costume is just like, he's like, I don't think that's true. I don't think your parents would ruin your life like that. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ah, okay. You sound like you're on the other side of the room.
Nope. No. Oh, well, yeah, I guess I'm not as close to the mic as I should be. There we go. That's a little bit better.
There, I've put that clip, or I've linked that clip in the chat.
Good.
Okay, it's 8 minutes long.
So does that bring us up to the modern day of I mean, we've even talked about the Michael Bay films today.
Yep.
So where do you think things go from here? Do we just get more Michael Bay trash, or is there an ongoing title going on in the comics or something like that?
Yeah, there is I think yeah, like back in 2019, the IDW Comics Transformers came to an end, and then after that, they then rebooted the continuity, and now since then they've been progressing through like a rebooted or then their new rebooted continuity,
Mm-hmm.
and they're slowly making their way from like pre-war Cybertron, like up to like building up to the actual civil war on Cybertron, like the actual split between Autobots and Decepticons, and then I would imagine they're going to progress through to the and they're probably going to progress through to the Autobots and Decepticons leaving Cybertron and crash landing on Earth, and then waking up and starting the Grey War and all of that.
Yeah.
Because
Good.
although I haven't read any of, well, actually, I've not read any of IDW's old continuity or their first continuity, or any of their rebooted continuity, so I don't like have a firm grasp on whatever's going on.
Sure.
There are
So,
also oh yeah, you
well, I was going to say too that the other one thing that I see a lot in relation to Transformers is Hasbro is still putting out toys like crazy. Hasbro Pulse is constantly, like every week, showing pictures of new things that they've got going, new deals they've got going for their new figures. So I know that
yeah.
it's still a big business.
Yeah, because that's yeah, so Hasbro has the Fan First Friday
Yep.
where they would reveal images and details on new figures that are being released. Because obviously this year they're currently going through the War for Cybertron Kingdom, which is the final part of the War for Cybertron trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
and then next year they'll start with an entirely new trilogy, or a new toy line will start next year, and
Yeah.
that's basically how Hasbro is going to keep going from basically. Well, I don't want to say from now on because they've been doing it for a couple of years or multiple years now. Before now, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's more, and there's also the G1 reissues that have been coming out. I'm assuming the Beast Wars, the like original Beast Wars figures post that you put on the our Transformers group,
Mm-hmm.
I believe those were like G well, technically Beast Wars is G1, but like a Beast Wars reissue maybe. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah.
what that is,
Yeah.
because it didn't actually say anywhere anything about reissue, but it's clearly the original Beast Wars toys being like sold again. So
Yeah, like I said,
of
that cheetah or whatever it was.
yeah, Cheetor.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my brother having that, and I remember playing with it, and I didn't really understand the concept of Beast Wars at the time, but then when I saw this, I'm like, well, that's if that's not a reissue, that's definitely a reimagining of something that my brother had.
Yeah,
So
because that looked like the exactly like the original Beast Wars really. So I think it might actually be a
well, I did
reissue.
feel like maybe the paint scheme was slightly different. It was a little less it was a little bit more realistic in the paint job, a little bit more detailed.
Yeah,
But either way, clearly inspired by, clearly an homage too. So yeah,
yeah,
Transformers is still out there, still definitely
yeah,
a big thing, and
yeah. Because
I think it's doing the same kind of thing that Star Wars is, where you have the old collectors still, wanting to see the incarnations they loved maintained and honored, but we still got new stuff coming out too.
Melissa Harris, the Rhino from Beast Wars is called Rhinox. Yeah, there was and also there's multiple different toy lines that are still going, because you have the reissue line, which is basically reissues of old G1 toys, and Hasbro also does like to kind of loophole their way into releasing other figures, like the old, well, the Titans Return Headmaster characters that were released a few years ago. Those figures have been repainted and re-released in like a re-release, a part of that re-release line, because it's technically re-releasing an older figure. It's not re-releasing a G1 figure, but it is still re-releasing an older figure. So it's like kind of a loophole way of releasing older figures,
Yeah.
which is something Hasbro likes to do, and repainting figures and giving us new characters
I
and new
got to be
versions of old
honest with you.
characters.
I know that some collectors are annoyed by that. I actually think that's a good thing, because if there's a figure you wanted and didn't get it, and I'm speaking from the point of view of a Star Wars collector, it's like, I need that one figure for my Cantina diorama or whatever, but it's going for like $200 on the secondary market because it, didn't sell real well, 10 years ago or
Yeah,
whatever. And then, well, now we're re-releasing it, repainted with a new, paint scheme on a new card. And it's like, good.
yeah,
Yeah, that'll do. That'll work for what I need.
and it's a cost effective measure as well, because
Yep.
you don't have to put any more money in like
You
remolding the
don't have
figure
to
or repainting.
retool it. You just, slap it on a new card, send it out, maybe just upgrade the paint job a little bit. You've got
Yeah,
all those molds, no sense wasting them.
yeah,
No, yeah, that's really good.
yeah. Hasbro does that quite a lot, not just with Transformers. They do it with the Marvel Legends as well. Because
Sure.
like half the Marvel Legends I have up on my wardrobe, multiple of them are actually the same base body, but they've just been repainted, added minor details changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melissa Harris, the Rhinox is a Maximal, which is descendant from the Autobots. Yeah, 'cause the Beast Wars characters, they're not Autobots and Decepticons, they're the descendants of Autobots and Decepticons, which are called Maximals and Predacons. And Predacons the bad guys, Maximals the good guys.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be fairly obvious, considering the bad guys are like Predacons as in Predator, and then
Yeah.
Maximals in Mammal. Kind of similar to how Autobot is kind of it basically just means car because it's automobile, and
Yeah.
then Decepticons is literally deceptive con
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
Because like if someone's called a Decepticon, it's like, do you have no reason to trust them if they're called that?
That's for sure. That's right. All right.
Yep. Yeah, because there's also obviously the Masterpiece line as well, which is a Japanese which is a Japanese line coming from Takara. They're basically like high end, really expensive, like really high value Transformers figures that are like designed to be like very accurate to the cartoon models of whatever character is released in that line.
I think the engineering on those toys is just brilliant, because the artists that do these cartoons give some general idea to how, this structure has to fold up into something else, but they can fudge it because it's drawn, right? And it
Yeah,
doesn't have to follow real world physics. But when you make the toy, you got to figure out a way to make that thing bend around and turn this way so it can tuck under
yeah,
here and, there,
yeah, and sometimes it doesn't quite work out.
right.
Yeah. Especially with triple changes, that's where you end up with like where you have one form actually looks pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
then you have this second form looks kind of okay, and then its third form
Just
isn't
all
very
one.
good because it's
Yeah.
like because it's changing into 3 different things, you kind of one of the modes you kind of have to sacrifice the look of one of the modes in order for the other modes to actually look good.
Right, exactly. So Transformers, is this a 3-part thing, or is there something more that we want to get out about the Transformers?
There is definitely
Actually, I'm
potentially
kind
more
of
that we could do about with
I
this.
was going to say what might be interesting if you want to do another show another time. You started talking about fan fiction, yours
Yeah,
specifically, but maybe a show dedicated to fan fiction in general and extending out the storylines that were never finished, in
yeah,
speculative ways.
yeah. That's actually a interesting idea.
Hmm.
I have also considered a rewatch of the 1986 animated film because I'd imagine for multiple people here, it's probably been a while since they've seen that movie.
Yeah. Is
Where
that the one
have you?
where Megatron dies? I mean, where Optimus Prime dies?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Where have you watched that movie, or was that like
I
completely
may have
unknown?
done when I was a kid, or at least caught part of it.
Yeah.
I do remember my friends who are bigger Transformer fans than I do talking about it. So yeah, it was a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That movie definitely has like a hero's journey kind of
Yeah,
story. Like,
yeah,
it
yeah.
very much follows that pattern of story like that. That like general story structure and everything.
Yeah.
Although it's kind of a 50-50 of corporate decision and actual genuinely wanting to tell a good story. It's kind of
Yeah.
50-50 between the two. Because the whole purpose of that movie was to get rid of a whole bunch of the characters to make way for the new toy to be sold.
Yep. Okay. So there we go. What are we talking
Yep.
about next week?
Well, next to it, now that I think about it, I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure I said last week that we would do the Star Wars prequels and then Ben 10 season 3. But
Okay.
then I realized
Hmm.
that would be 3 weeks rather than two, and I think 2 weeks is enough time for
Okay.
you and Nanette to watch through the season.
Yep. So
Yeah,
next week, Ben 10 season 3.
yeah. Next week with season 3 Ben 10, and then we'll talk about the prequel Star Wars prequel trilogy the week after that instead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't
Sounds
know
good.
why I mixed that up last week.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
That sounds like a plan. And
yeah,
so yeah, that's sounds like a plan for me. And of course, this is Sunday, so tonight, Geeky Geezers at 8 Central, 9 Eastern, and we've got some topics to talk about. Let me tell you,
yeah,
it's been a week. We don't have a lot of topics, but the ones we have, we're going to spend some time on because there's been some things this week.
yep.
All righty then.
Well, that's goodbye from me.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. I super appreciate you hanging out with me this morning.
We will see you more likely later on at Geeky Geezers,
Yep.
but on this channel next Sunday we'll be continuing our journey through Ben 10.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Take
Yep.
care.
Thanks for being here.